Hi, I'm Rachel Abassi, and I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic and stroke survivor. I totally switched things up on you. So, welcome to another episode of Reads and Recovery on the Recovery Daily podcast. The time has come already where we are reviewing another book. Seems like only yesterday we were going over My Stroke of Insight by Jill Bolt Taylor. This month we are reviewing Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor E. Frankl. So this book has touched millions of lives from my understanding. This book is a narrative of survival and an exploration of the human spirit in our darkest days. And it focuses on our search for purpose when we've given up all hope. Or we have a reason to have given up all hope. So grab your favorite cup of tea, get cozy, and we're going to explore this idea of finding meaning in our lives. Man's Search for Meaning is a timeless book, and it combines the account of Viktor Frankl's experiences as a Holocaust survivor with his psychology theories. And he actually, from what I learned in the book, what I heard was that he began writing these psychology theories prior to becoming a prisoner at Auschwitz. So Frankl was an Austrian psychiatrist who was imprisoned in several concentration camps, including Auschwitz during World War II. The book is divided into two parts. It felt like the first contained a lot of his experiences in concentration camps and the interactions he had with other prisoners. And then the second part of the book contains more of his psychological theories, particularly his development of logotherapy. So the first part of the book is gripping from the very start, as is anyone's account of life in Nazi concentration camps. Whenever I get exposed to any stories about that, I almost turn into like obsessively listening. So Frankl's narratives capture the brutality and inhumanity that the millions of the prisoners endured. It's difficult to listen to, no matter how many personal stories that you are exposed to. Frankl has this focus in his book on the inner life of the prisoners from a psychological perspective. His observations of those around him. There were those prisoners who were able to find meaning even in the smallest thoughts that they would have, or the smallest actions that they were, the smallest work that they were involved in the camps. And he talks about how those who found some sort of meaning were more likely to survive. And for me, as I was listening to this and I was putting together my review of it, I would really be able to interchange that word meaning with the search for hope. The search for meaning for me was interchangeable with this idea of the search for hope. And I don't know that I've ever thought of those two words as interchangeable until I read this book. He writes about moments of kindness that he witnesses of the guards, fellow prisoners for each other. And he talks about, honestly, his own acts of kindness and the importance of our own thoughts and how they generate hope when we can't necessarily find it in our surroundings. So he talks about this power of inner freedom, and how it can be found even in the face of extreme suffering, that somebody's attitude during unavoidable suffering can save the person's life. So what was, I call, nod worthy to me, for me, like when I was listening, I'm like, yeah, was how Frankl holds, how that life, he talked about, how life holds potential meaning under any circumstances, no matter where we are, there is meaning that can be found, even in the most miserable circumstances. He talks about how some of the prisoners found meaning through love, and I think he was included, even if those that they loved, they didn't even know if they were still alive. Like for him, he was thinking of his wife. He was even talking to his wife, and at times, like in his head, and that love kept him going, not knowing that she actually wasn't still alive anymore, which I find fascinating. I find it really fascinating. I find it, honestly, I find it comparable to my higher power, to my concept of my higher power. So he also talks about how some of the prisoners found meaning through their faith, through enduring suffering with dignity, not letting the guards see the suffering, like see what they were actually feeling like on the inside. And this, I think this idea of finding meaning through in the midst of suffering is very relatable in recovery for folks that, I'm still baffled by the stories that I hear of folks that have survived a stroke. And there are people who come out of a stroke and the only thing that they can move is their eyes. And yet through this perseverance, they are able to get to the point where they're running a marathon. I mean, that blows my mind. How do these people do it? I feel like this book really captures how there is a way, that we can find meaning in our struggles, that we can cultivate hope, even if it's not easily laid out for us, that finding purpose in the midst of suffering helps us to continue on, number one. I mean, that's the beginning. When you are in a position of unavoidable suffering, I think you first have to make a decision that you're going to go on. And I don't mean that by, okay, I'm either going to kill myself or I'm not. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about your spirit goes on, like the human spirit. You make a decision that I'm gonna fight. I'm gonna fight for myself. And that decision then is followed by this search for purpose, um, or this cultivating purpose. It's almost not searching, it's cultivating, it's building it out of nothing. Um, and that has a huge impact on how we progress in recovery. It has an impact on how we progress as human beings, no matter what we go through. When we lose our soulmate, how do you deal with that? How do you cultivate purpose in your life when, for everything that you have lived for and known, that purpose is gone? How do you build it again? So I think this is an interesting book that can be applied in all different situations like this. The second part of the book, Frankl includes this, he introduces this logotherapy, which is based on the premise that the primary motivational force in humans is a will to meaning. So Frankl's logotherapy is apparently one of the top 3 psychology, I guess, thoughts of school. And he obviously focuses on this finding meaning even in the face of suffering, that we find meaning in 3 ways. We find it through working for a greater purpose than ourselves, which those of you who are in sobriety might find this very familiar sounding. Okay, so again, he believes that we find meaning in 3 ways: through work with a purpose greater than ourselves, through love by being of service to others, and by the attitude we take during unavoidable suffering. And if that doesn't scream AA principles, I don't know what does. Like, it really, I was like, wow, did they include a little bit of this in the AA program? I don't know. I'm almost inclined to look that up and see if the founders of AA brought in logotherapy. I don't know. And maybe that's something that everybody already knows and I didn't, but I'll look it up. So through work, service, and attitude is how we contribute to our existence, to the greater good, to our own well-being. Finding purpose and helping others is a huge motivation for me. It's incredibly fulfilling. I was talking to my psychiatrist yesterday, and she actually said, because she was asking me about me, and I shifted the focus, and I knew that I was doing it. And I shifted the focus and was talking about another woman in my vestibular support group. And I was talking about how listening to this woman and her her balloon was deflated for sure. Like, she was talking about how she can't have relationships with anybody because she she doesn't feel like she has anything to give to another person. Like, it made me very sad to listen to what she had to say. And I was sharing this with my psychiatrist because I was thinking, by listening to that, I'm able to look inward and see that I've got a lot of good going on inside me. And so she responded by saying, she wants to make sure that I'm always being cognizant of what I'm getting out of these support groups rather than what I'm trying to give to the support groups. So that's kind of what I was trying to say, but I guess I shifted too far in the conversation, I think. But what I was trying to really say is, by listening, almost like when I'm in AA meetings, when I was listening and hearing the struggle, I was thinking of the progress that I've made. Um, it happens when we're in support groups and when I'm in sobriety meetings. I'm hearing um, experience, strength, and hope from other people, and that is what squeezes out of that is um, I'm I'm comparing, I'm listening, I'm thinking, and it becomes me not just caring about the other people and being empathetic for the other people, but also building my own confidence in my program. And so she just wanted to make sure that, although I have empathy for her, that what I'm getting out of the program is not just making me feel sad for other people or wanting to speak up. And I actually spoke up in that meeting and said that I recommended seeing a therapist of some sort for chronic illnesses, because it sounds like she needed some additional professional help. But my psychiatrist wants to make sure that I am continuing to grow in my own program. So, going back to the book, Frankl emphasizes the importance of love and connection. He believes that the experience of love is one of the highest purposes that we can aspire to. And in that light, he references the love for his wife and how it motivated him quite often, and it gave his life meaning when he was out doing physical labor outdoors. Um, sometimes it was the only thing that kept him going. He would actually have conversations with her, and what he didn't know at the time was that she had already been killed. Um, and it is the love itself that helped save his life. Those that lost their meaning for life ended up giving up their will to live and would die soon after, he noticed. I thought it was also interesting how observant he was in these situations. I mean, was his life before he even went into the concentration camp. That was his area of study, was to study people. So it was only natural for him to study people in this environment. But with his own personal suffering, he was still inclined to keep going. It was almost like, for me, the purpose, and he talked about that, the writing the book and sharing with the world this logotherapy was also part of his motivation to keep going. So this attitude that he takes, that we can take in unavoidable suffering, is perhaps the most challenging, I think, part of his message. He argues that even when we are powerless to change a situation, we can still choose our attitude. It reminds me of some conversations I've had with my daughter. It reminds me of some episodes I've had where I told you guys, we just choose happiness. You just let it go and choose happiness, which I've talked ad nauseum about that. But it is a powerful reminder that while we may not control the events that happen to us, we do have control over how we respond to them. So we know this already, because we talk about it all the time, but how do you practice it? Especially in the face of these extreme conditions. Reading this book, Man's Search for Meaning, for me was an experience, and it didn't end when the book was over. It really requires the reader, in my opinion, to take time to contemplate the ideas that Frankl suggests in the book. And if I'm being honest, when I first shut the book, metaphorically speaking, because I listen on Audible, I thought, okay, that was good. Not mind blowing, but it was good. That was what my reaction was. And then I thought more about it afterwards. Like as the days went by, I found myself going back to these ideas that he was talking about in the book. And I felt driven even to do an episode earlier in the month before this Reads and Recovery episode about a single idea that was proposed in the book. And that was the episode about finding meaning in our lives. I think it was that one. And I think that over time, the more that I keep kind of mixing those ideas up in my head, whisking them around, if you will, for those of you who bake, I found that his insights about our capacity as human beings to be resilient, to control our response to our circumstances was very inspiring. His proof, I mean, he is proof that we can find purpose amid suffering. And that is a message that of hope for anyone. Not only just people in recovery. It's really a call to look beyond our pain and find deeper significance in our experiences. Personally, this book has helped me in my effort that I've been working on to reframe my recovery and my disability as that spiritual checkpoint. Frankl's emphasis on the power of choice and the importance of finding meaning has been a confirmation for me, like a validation that, yep, I'm doing the right thing. He talks about, I wouldn't say talks, well, he does kind of talk about it. He alludes to it. What I got from it is the same idea that my psychiatrist told me several weeks ago, which is that sadness and hope can coexist. Suffering and hope can coexist. It's that choose happiness thing, which I was just talking about, that I don't choose happiness by letting something go. I don't have to let something go to choose happiness. I can continue to process and figure out that suffering, that pain, and still have hope. Like, we have the ability as human beings to feel complex emotions, and there are multiple layers. I've talked about that a lot over the past year, is this color wheel of emotions. And it's just I feel like in the book it was really validating a lot of that for me. So Frankl has a ton of famous quotes, and he has written, I think it was 39 books, I think. So there's lots of quotes. I would encourage you to go online and just Google him and learn more about him. I mean, he's an interesting person in history to learn more about. So I wanted to leave you with this quote that I really appreciate. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. And this captures the spirit of recovery, this long-term stretch for hope within ourselves to face our lives as they are in recovery and to create meaning, no matter what the unavoidable circumstances are, whether it's a stroke, whether it is alcoholism, whether it is an eating disorder, mental health challenges, all of this stuff. When we can't change what happened, then we have to change. Something has to change. So if we can't change the situation, we have to change. We have to adapt. So thank you for joining me on this Reads and Recovery episode of the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor E. Frankl. I hope this book review inspired you to read it if you haven't already, or even to look into his life or look into some of his other books that he's written. As always, I would love to hear your thoughts. If you read the book, I'd love to hear about it. And you can email me any of your feedback at rachel@recoverydailypodcast.com. If you enjoyed the book review, subscribe, leave a review of your own in the comments. All of this stuff helps me to reach more listeners. So I really appreciate you listening. I appreciate you, and I will talk to you tomorrow.